Code Concepts with myself, Rachel Patterson, and Pete Roque, who is unavailable to be with us today, but sends his love. So good morning on this glorious Friday, February 18th. As always, Pete and I try to bring you some great guests with some very relevant information to our industry. And today does not disappoint. We have an even more special guest with us. So I want to kind of get a little bit of information from you, sir, but I want to introduce you first and foremost as Mr. Tony Escamilla. He's the proud founder and owner of Villa Home Inspections. So Mr. Escamilla, I know that you have a relationship with Pete. He's not on here today, so it's just going to be you and I. So I'd love to get to know you. Love to get to know you a little bit more. But first and foremost, why don't you introduce yourself to the guests and let us know about you?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. My name is Tony Escamilla, and I am the owner of Villa Home Inspections. I've been in business for 23 years now. We inspect single-family homes, apartment buildings, commercial. We do sewer scopes, we do mold inspection, we do moisture intrusion. One of the other things that I do is that I have a working relationship with a local city in which I am a code enforcement officer. And so I'm a little bit on both sides of the fence here, is that I do code-related inspections in that capacity, and then a much more in-depth inspection in my other capacity as a business owner.
Awesome. So you're a multifaceted industry professional for sure. So with your 23 years of experience, tell us a little bit about how you got involved in this industry.
Well, I got into the. You're gonna have to apologize. My dog is a little active. Somebody just walked in and he'll be barking, so you might hear him occasionally.
No worries at all. That's totally.
So, anyways, yeah, I got into the business 23 years ago. I had a construction background. I'm a licensed general contractor as well, and I decided that long ago that I was going to go back to school and learn how to do construction inspection. So I went to a local community college here at PCC in Pasadena. They have a great construction inspection program, and it's all taught by active or retired building inspectors, building officials, architects, engineers. And so went through that whole process, and I decided to go out on my own afterwards. And I started my business, and little by little, it grew over the years. And then when the market crashed in 2008, I just happened to be hired by a local city, and I was the last person to get hired right before the market crashed. And so I've been with them ever since, but I maintained my business over that crash in the market. And then little by little, the business started coming back. I'm still working for the city. I had to make a decision. What am I going to do? So I brought on help for my business. I have 3 other inspectors. I have a office assistant, and I have a marketing person. And so I mainly just manage that, but I'm still working for the city. And for the city, I do, primarily, we do the complaint calls, but I do primarily the housing inspections for the city. So I'm doing all of the apartment buildings throughout the city.
So you say, the housing inspections, so the interior home inspections. What are you looking for when you're doing those inspections on the city side?
On the city side, we're doing, there's an ordinance that requires all, kind of like the city of Los Angeles has SCAP. We require all apartments to be inspected every 4 years.
Okay.
And so we're going in there looking for life safety issues, overall maintenance of the building, smoke, carbon monoxide alarms, make sure they have functional heat, hot water, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, overall maintenance of the exterior as well.
So do you see that transferring over, into the code enforcement world with the junk, trash, litter, how does that kind of work in the city of Pasadena with basic nuisance violations to the more extensive, interior inspections like you're talking about?
Well, for the city of Pasadena, like I said, we're just looking for those things that I just mentioned.
Okay.
The basic property maintenance, and a lot of the you've probably seen this. A lot of the owners, unfortunately, even in a city like Pasadena, they do bare minimum, and I mean bare minimum, and they won't do anything for another 4 years until I come back. And so every chance that I get when I go in, I take a really close look, and I make sure that they bring everything up to speed. But those are inspections are a lot more limited than what I do on the home inspection side. On the home inspection side, we dig deep into, because we have a lot more time, a lot more resources, and we dig deep into everything. We open up electrical panels, we check heaters, we climb inside attics, we get on top of roofs, we crawl under buildings, or send a robot under the building. It's a lot more intense than the housing inspections, like for the city of Pasadena.
Makes sense. So, we see a lot, folks like yourself, Pete Roque, Miss Cecilia Muela,
Yeah.
we start out on one side and find this bigger need. And it sounds like that's what you found, was a bigger need. So talk a little bit more about your company. We'll get back to the code enforcement side on Pasadena. Tell us a little bit more about your company and really, truly why you created this, why you started it. I want to hear the passion and find out, all the good stuff on why you started this business.
They say if, I know this sounds really cheesy, but they say if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. 23 years later, I still enjoy, believe it or not, crawling under buildings, crawling inside attics, getting on top of roofs. And while I have my inspectors out there doing stuff, for example, when I leave here today, I'm going to go do a sewer line inspection. And I like it. It keeps me on my toes. We inspect everywhere, which is different from working for a municipality, that you're limited in the geographical boundaries of where you are. For my personal business, we go everywhere. And so I get to see all kinds of buildings, all ages, everything from the early 1900s to, brand new construction, which I'm doing tomorrow. And I get to see everything from South Central Los Angeles to Bel Air. And so it's a huge scope of things. So the job is never boring. It's just never boring. And so, like I said, I started 23 years ago. I thoroughly enjoy what I do. The company has grown exponentially in the last few years, and it's continuing to grow. So, I have a little bit of a balancing game going on between what I do for the city and what I do for myself. But I have the right people in the right places, so it gives me a lot of flexibility to do both.
So Tony, hi everybody. I'm a little late to the show, but I'm here. So in Pasadena, you have that quadrennial inspection program, which is you
Yes.
do the inspection every 4 years. And just seeing, and experiencing your code enforcement craft, when you go out doing inspections, and doing the, people want to get these inspections because they want to make sure that their houses are tip-top condition, or they want to report. When you see something when you're doing code enforcement, what is it that sometimes you see and you're like, I know there's that balancing act of like, hey, maybe I shouldn't say anything, maybe I should. How does that weigh on you sometimes?
Doing code enforcement, particularly in the housing section, I've done for many years what we call the property maintenance, which is, all the complaint calls that come in. My neighbor built a fence, and their tree is overhanging my property, and somebody's building something illegally, and I've handled a lot of those, and they're a little bit different from what I'm currently doing, which is the housing inspection, because you would think that a city like Pasadena doesn't have any slumlords. But surprisingly, there are some really bad properties, and thankfully not a whole heck of a lot, but I've had 2 go into prosecution in the next couple of weeks. And it's, you walk in to do this inspection, and this as professionals, you walk in to do this inspection, and you keep a straight face. Certain things that you can't say while you're there, even though you'd love to. And in the back of my mind, it's screaming like, "Really, dude? Really?" It's like, I walked into apartments that are missing windows, altogether. It's like completely open to the outside. That have no heat, that the ceiling is collapsing because there's been plumbing leaks from above. And that's one of the guys who's going to go to prosecution soon. Sewage leaks outside. And, you still have to maintain your professionalism. Mm-hmm. and keep a straight face, and then just go do your job and document and move the case forward. The difference between that and what I do for my personal business is that in the capacity of a code enforcement officer, I can make them do these things. In the capacity as a home inspector, it really depends on what side of the transaction you're on. If you're on the buyer's side of the transaction, they want you to find every last little thing so that they can negotiate a lower price on the property. If you're on the seller side, they don't want you to find as much. But I've done inspections for probate. I've done inspections for divorces. I've done inspections for insurance companies. Yeah.
Wow.
So one of the so you are certified in the residential inspections and stuff like that. So and a lot of cities don't require any type of certifications, but I know you're very a certified person. So one of the things that you see in the home inspection business that would help other code enforcement officers in the normal capacity. What are some things that you'd say would benefit code enforcement officers to learn a little bit more, whether it's electrical or plumbing, or what is something that you think code enforcement officers could benefit from the things that you inspect versus their regular normal jobs?
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? I am ICC certified as a residential and commercial building inspector, and I have the housing and property maintenance certification as well. And it surprises me how many cities have no requirements at all for certification for code enforcement officers, particularly those type of certifications. KCO is a great organization, and they do training for code enforcement officers. And what I experienced is, I went through it several years ago, is that you have all of the legalities of code enforcement and curtilage and privacy, and all of these things that you cannot do. And it surprises me the lack of technical education that is out there for code enforcement officers. In answer to your question, yes, I believe plumbing, electrical, roofing, structural, a code enforcement officer should have an understanding of all the major systems of a structure. Because when you walk in to do a code enforcement inspection, you may not notice that there is an addition to the house that has been that's unsafe. You may not notice that unless you have this technical training, that the stairs that they added to the attic conversion from the outside are not properly built and potentially would collapse. And so those are the things that I think code enforcement officers should have a better understanding, so that they walk in, they're safe, and they can spot things that you normally wouldn't spot, basically.
Yeah, you make a great point. It's very true. In the code enforcement world, there's just not a lot of true technical training out there. So when you speak about that training and the importance of what you need to know, how do you relate that back to your business and training your new employees? What do you find as the most crucial, important basics to start with when you're training your new employees?
When I'm training my new employees, we go through. There's different certifications that you get to be a home inspector. We go through a trade organization called the National Association of Certified Home Inspectors. And they have a lot of good training, in person and online training. So I have my guys start there and start doing the training. Some of them come with more experience than others. And they start going through there. And I make it a point to take them out on the field with me. And it's not until I'm ready to let them loose that they'll go on their own. And so they might be doing 20, 30, 50 inspections with me before, while doing the online and in-person training, in-class training, before I'll let them loose to do an inspection on their own. I do want them to, and I'm working on getting them their ICC certification, at least for residential building inspection as well.
That's great. That was going to be my next question, just to understand, what certificates your people hold. When you look yourself up online and you check out anything that has to do with you, you can certainly see the long list of certifications that you hold. So that's quite awesome. Great.
Yeah. There's no requirement. It's kind of sad, but there is no requirement to be a home inspector in the state of California. Anybody can say I'm a home inspector, and guess what? You're a home inspector. But if you want to be taken seriously out there, and you don't want to be a walking lawsuit, you have to have the training, and you have to have the certification, because the first thing that happens, and I've seen it because I've been part of these as an expert witness, when these guys get pulled into court. And even as code enforcement officers, I've been in court, and what's the very first thing that the opposing attorney is going to ask you is what your education is, what your training is, what your certifications are. Right. And I wish they had a little bit more of that, on the home inspection side. And this is where I wish we had more of that technical training on the code enforcement side as well.
Yeah, we agree, Mr. Escamilla. I mean, obviously, everything that Pete and I, Cecilia and Pete, everybody out there, we're really trying to get that information pushed out, because you're right. There is nothing more important than that. And getting people to understand that, these positions that maintain quality of life and building safety, they're just so important. And we need that technical training to back us up with what we're doing. Anybody can go to a code book, and sometimes they say, a monkey can do code enforcement because you just have to read the book. We all know that that's not true. I mean, it takes a lot of interpretation and so on and so forth. So it's refreshing to see that you feel the same way, that you want to boost that technical knowledge. And it really sounds like that's a lot of what you're doing with your company out there too.
Yeah, I do it with my company. Sometimes I'm a little on the code enforcement side. I'm a little frustrated. Depending on which way the wind is blowing, sometimes it's like trying to push sand uphill. But luckily we have some really good people and some good management, and they have been supportive in trying to get these the advancement of education. But circling back to what we're talking about is, when as a code enforcement officer, when the city is saying, okay, we're going to pay for this training, so you guys have to pick which training we're going to go. We have a limited budget. There's 14 of us in our department.
Oh, wow.
Are we going to do CASIO training, or are we going to do ICC training? And so there is that gap, in my opinion, with that technical training that we're talking about. If we can find a way to merge those and bring both sides together, I think it would be beneficial for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
we should have a lot of it. Oops, sorry, go ahead, Pete.
Oh no! One of the things that one of the reasons why we brought you on, because the home inspection, the actual inspection is a little bit more technical than a code enforcement inspection. A lot of times we get those calls like, "Hey, I have a hole in my roof," and you're looking at it, and you as a home inspector can say, "Okay, that hole is caused because of a leak, or because of this, or because of that." Where a normal code enforcement officer normally looks at them like, "Yeah, there's a hole there. Let's get it fixed," but there's no reason why they're getting it fixed. Or there's the wall is bubbling, but why is it bubbling? Those maybe you have a leak behind it. Those kind of things, and you can say, hey, we need to, you need to fix that leak, or, kind of dwell down a little bit more on the source of the issue.
Agreed, 100%. I can't tell you how many times I go into these apartment buildings that I mentioned, and yeah, there's bubbling on the ceiling, there's stains, moisture stains on the ceiling. There's a very obvious, at least to me, plumbing leak from the second story, or a roof leak. However, because as code enforcement officers, we don't climb on roofs. We can't see the condition of the roof. So what ends up happening is that in some cases, some of these bad properties that I'm talking about, all I can call out is there's some moisture damage on the ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
And they are, when I come back, they patched it, they painted it. But guess what? 3 months later, when it starts raining again, the tenant calls us again. My roof is leaking. It's leaking again. So we, these property owners hit bare minimum code, and okay, the ceiling had some damage. That's all you called out, so we fixed the ceiling. Never mind the roof that's in bad shape, or the plumbing that caused it, and the patch it, and sure enough, the bathroom upstairs will continue leaking, and it becomes a problem again.
Yeah, we see that a lot, just in the basic code enforcement I do. My department covers dry rot or things of that nature where, we don't have a whole lot of technical training on what is caused, what causes that problem, what happened with termite infestation. We know what caused that problem, but ultimately, like you said, it's the bare minimum, because a lot of the times with code enforcement officers, we have to close a case out when we go to a piece of property that's public and we can see that the issue is no longer there, right? Now,
Yep.
Whether that's the owner putting up a board, covering the dry rot.
Yeah.
Versus
and that's all it is.
Yeah, versus actually taking it out and taking care of it. So, we do tend to see that a lot. That makes perfect sense. So we got a good comment here from the audience, and good morning to everyone joining us today. This is from Miss Morris. Says home inspectors are so important. Absolutely. They really help the community when it comes to multi-housing buildings. Home inspections not only identify the issues, but also ensure the problem is fixed for the betterment of the renter. That's a really good point that you make there, Miss Morris, because again, what are we out here for? We're out here to improve, or in my words, enhance, create, and maintain quality of life and safety standards, right? So we as code enforcement officers, we can come in and take care of that visual blight. But what it really sounds like is, home inspectors sometimes can get into the true, nooks and crannies and the reasons why things are the way they are, and create that lasting compliance, effect versus a Band-Aid.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That broken window syndrome is that we have to stay on top of the little things, even though it might be a Band-Aid, but it's very easy to see when you drive up on a property, whether I'm doing, code enforcement or I'm doing home inspection. I drive up, and I'm sure you've seen these. You walk up, you drive up, and you haven't even got out of the car, and you're like, oh, yeah, this is going to be bad. And those are the ones, for better or worse, I built a little bit of a reputation in my department for, being tough on landlords. And so landlords typically don't like to see me coming. And, I make sure that, because we're only in there once every 4 years, that they bring it up to at least bare minimum on there, because there's so many other buildings that we have to worry about, that I'm going to spend as much time on this building if it's in bad shape as needed. The ones that are in better shape, we're a little more lenient on, because overall they're in good shape, and that the management for that building is doing what they're supposed to as best they can, and a lot better than most. And so I tend to specialize on the ugly ones.
Yeah. So, it's funny, in being in code enforcement, we get to see some of the cream of the crop, I would say slumlords out there. We get to see some of them. They put Band-Aids on everything. And what are some typical code enforcement things that you see out there, and you're like, hey, this could be fixed. This could be a long-term remedy if you do X, Y, or Z. And I'll give you an example. Sometimes you have a leak, and it's causing all sorts of bubble, like you said, bubbling and stuff like that. So, what is something that you constantly see and say, hey, if you fix this now, maybe it's not going to be an issue in the next 4 years when I come back.
Right.
Is there certain things that you see out there?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you, and this one happens to be across the board, whether it be code enforcement or home inspection. In my experience, what causes most property maintenance issues is moisture. And moisture, either the roof, lack of roof maintenance, which is so basic and so inexpensive. Sealing the flashings around the vent pipes, sealing the wall connections to the roof, which takes 20 minutes, a little can of roofing tar and a spatula, literally, and a lack of maintenance. And that tends to cause roof leaks, which cause more damage inside. Lack of maintenance on roof eaves, for example. And this is where we get some of that termite, that rot damage that we're talking about, where the fascia boards start rotting out because they haven't been painted in a long time, and the water, there's no roof gutters installed, and the water is damaging the wood. Or carports in apartment buildings. Same thing. The roof hasn't been maintained in a while. You get termites on the bottom of the posts. You get termites on the beams up above. And these are the little things that, with regular maintenance, can be remedied literally in an hour on a weekend. And most people, unfortunately, don't do it, even on whether it be a home inspection or a housing inspection. It's moisture is what causes a lot of the damage that I see. Moisture, improper site drainage, where there's no roof gutters on the roof and the soil is sloped towards the building, whether it be an apartment building or a house. Water's getting in under the house. Now you're talking about long-term foundation damage. Now you're talking about fungus growth in the crawl space. I had one just the other day where there was a good amount of fungus growing in the crawl space because there's so much humidity and not enough ventilation. So the tenants were both had allergies and asthma, and they were having issues there. And this was a private inspection, so I went in there with our indoor air quality sensors, and we picked up all kinds of stuff. And so they reached back to the property management company, who happened to be a big property management company right away. And they got an industrial hygienist out there. They did much more in-depth testing and lab testing and that kind of stuff. And they pinpointed it. But the point to my story is that it's lack of maintenance and moisture are the things across the board that cause things. And I try to, whether I'm doing a home inspection or I'm doing a housing inspection for the city, I try to educate the managers or the property owners and tell them, look, this is why it's important. If you do this here, you can prevent yourself some trouble down the road. Or sometimes I'll see something that's not a code violation quite yet. I said, hey, this is going to cause you a problem down the road, so you might want to take care of it right now, and where it's going to be easy to take care of and not that expensive. Or I'll educate managers, in apartments, and they have and I get it, and I'm the bad guy around the summertime where everybody has a wall air conditioner in their window, or a window air conditioner, and there's only one window in the bedroom, and I have to tell everybody they have to remove them. And I can just hear my ears ringing as I'm leaving. But yeah, it's a matter of educating people and just telling them, hey, look, this is why it's important, and this is why you should be maintaining these little things, or this is why you need to remove that air conditioner.
Yeah. Well, knowledge is power with everything we do, right? I mean, ultimately, it's got to make you feel pretty darn good when you can walk into a situation such as what you talked about with the mold in the crawl space, where you truly affected someone's quality of life, something that they may not have known or understood what was affecting, maybe an illness or, exacerbating their asthma or whatever health issues that they had. But that has to make you feel pretty good that not only are you going in in there and, making the home safer and better, but you did something for those people. I mean, knowledge is just power. So that's awesome.
Now, one of the things, Tony, that you mentioned was when you do these mold inspections, mold's a big issue. A lot of times we walk into situations it's not healthy for us to be in those situations, and I know sometimes as code enforcement officers we don't have that education to say, hey, we use a moisture meter or we using this because I see some of the stuff that you're doing on your social media that you're bringing these tools and technology into it and to make it your job a little bit easier and and more thorough. But as a code enforcement officer, when people walk into a house and it's just full of black mold, you're like, hey, let me take a picture. Some of these
but you're breathing it.
you're right. Some of these
Yeah.
precautions are being taken. So what are some things that you take on the inspection side that you think code enforcement officers should kind of maybe take note to it when doing these types of inspections?
Well, a couple of things. Recently, there's been a lot more talk, and there was bills passed about inspector safety. And I know there's a big push in our industry as code enforcement officers to provide more training for safety. And it's not just our safety from harm, because unfortunately, people get aggressive sometimes and that kind of stuff. Safety also includes walking into a room that has mold all over the walls. Our safety also includes, I had one last week that it's a typical sad situation, elderly woman living in a house in complete disrepair, hoarding condition, mold everywhere. The way that we got it, the Humane Society had recently removed something like 50 cats from the property, and she still had at least a dozen or more cats through the property when we went in. No running water, no power, no heat. She has to have been in her 80s. She's still living there by herself, and we literally had to go full hazmat to get in there. Wow. With the respirator, with the Tyvek suit over our heads, and the booties and the gloves and just everything, because we knew we were lucky enough to know what the conditions were before we walked in. And so we were able to take the right precautions. And even then, when I got out of there, I ended up having to go home because it was so bad that it seeped through even the Tyvek suit. And when I got out of there, the smell of cat urine just was all over my clothes, my hair, everything. And I went home. I called my wife on the way home and I said, hey, can you put out some clothes for me in the garage? And I'm going to get changed in the garage before I even walk in the house. And then I'm going to go straight up and take a shower. And but that is an extreme case. Right. But we do walk into things where we really should be more aware of our surroundings as far as things like mold. I walked into a place that I could swear there was no evidence there, but given the smell, I could swear that they were cooking meth. Because it was so strong that it immediately irritated my bronchioles, and I had to walk out. And those are the things where I think as code enforcement officers we need to be more mindful, and there should be, now that we have some of these laws in place, there should be more of a push for inspector safety. Right. As far as environmental aspects. Now, of course, there's the precautions that you take walking into a potentially hostile situation and that kind of stuff. But you brought up mold, and so yeah, I think as an industry and as a whole, we need to pay more attention to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So you talked about an extreme case, but and you touched a little bit about those walking into a potentially meth infested home, or however you would want to say that. But really, what are going to be those key factors for you when determining what type of PPE or precautions that you're going to need to take on an everyday visit for just a basic home inspection when not having any info?
I think about, for my private business, I have a backpack that I carry,
Okay.
and I have everything from a dust mask to an N95 to a full blown respirator. I have gloves, I have booties, I have pretty much everything I need. And I wish that as a code enforcement officer, we would be equipped with something similar to that. And I've been in places where, nobody wants to, or it's just uncomfortable using it because you're
Mm-hmm.
walking into somebody's home and obviously they're comfortable living like that. But the moment you put on that mask and you put on those gloves, the temperature in the room changes because the homeowner is like, well, why are you wearing all of that stuff? And I've seen a lot of code enforcement officers who hesitate to put on the PPE.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, if I'm going to walk into a place and I walk in and I immediately smell raw sewage, or I immediately see mold on the walls and moisture, or I immediately see like the one that I just did, a dozen cats in the place. You can smell the urine. Yeah, I'm going to go back to the car and I'm going to put on the respirator, regardless of what anybody thinks. I'm going to put on my latex gloves, and if need be, I'll put on my booties and walk in. Or I'll just say, hey, you know what? We're going to have to come back another time, because this is not a safe environment. And I'll let management know and say, hey, look, I don't feel comfortable in this environment. We have to make other arrangements or be better prepared to come back, like this extreme case that we just did.
That makes sense.
And
So,
I think, oh, go ahead.
no, by all means, go ahead, Pete.
No, I think in our industry that should be a standard. Having some a Tyvek suit, gloves, goggles, shoe covers. I'm telling you, it's you never know when you're going to use it. And I've been called out to slap houses, with the police department where they go in there and they're like, oh my lord, look at this place, it's such a mess. We walk in, I'm like, no, I gotta go get my suit. They look at me like, why do you need a suit? But at the end of the day, some of that stuff is hard to wash off. Like you said, you told your wife, hey, I'm going to change in the garage. For us, that stuff stays in our nostrils for a couple of days, and it's hard to shake that urine smell, or it's just hard. Sometimes it's especially with those with fleas, they're attracted to light white stuff. So when you come out, you're covered in fleas. So in your
Yep.
Tyvek suit, which if you didn't have that suit, it'd be all over your regular clothing, and you're taking that stuff
Yeah.
home. So yeah, I think it's important for code enforcement divisions out there to actually have some sort of personal protective equipment out there with them at all times, because you never know. It's like you said, that meth smells, it soaks into the walls, and
Yeah.
that stuff's hard to get rid of. Urine, it soaks
Yeah.
into the walls, into the flooring. It's hard to get rid of.
It's one of those things that is not necessarily quantifiable. But my concern has always been, because I've been doing this for so long, and I've crawled under buildings, I crawl into attic spaces, and I'm exposed to a lot of dust and mold and stuff like that. My concern, and even as a code enforcement officer, is long term. Walking into this place that has obvious mold in it, or walking into a place that has cat urine, and yeah, you're exposed to it for a few minutes, but then you're exposed to the next one down the road. And then you're exposed to the next one down the road, and it's not immediately quantifiable. But long term, what health concerns is that going to cause for us? And so I think we need to be equipped with the right PPE and not be afraid to use it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And be mindful that, like you said, there could be long-term effects from things. So having that gear with you, whether that's a go bag in your truck or the bag that you take with you every day with your duty bag, having that protective equipment is extremely important. We don't want to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The other thing I equip all of my guys in their cars. I just recently bought them, and we replaced theirs. We recently bought them new first aid kits.
Awesome.
And I got these really extensive first aid kits because one of my guys, unfortunately, he was in an attic checking out a heating system, and one of the panels came down, hit him in the face, broke his tooth,
Oh, no.
cut him, and yeah, so I was like, okay, we have a lot of safety training. We do regular safety training, and which I think we should be doing as code enforcement officers as well. Tailgate, safety training,
Yeah.
and videos and stuff like that, and equip them with their first aid kits, and we're setting up first aid certification for them as well.
That's awesome.
Because you just never know, and as code enforcement officers as well, I walked into one. I've been bitten twice by dogs and ended up in a clinic. I walked into a place, like we were saying, where it was really, really bad inside. And then 24 hours later, I get a call from the real estate agent saying, hey, just thought you might want to know the guy was hospitalized with tuberculosis. There I was in the room without a mask for an extended period of time. And so I called my manager, and he's like, all right, stop what you're doing. We'll get somebody cover your inspections. You need to go to the clinic and get a TB test. And so I think we should, as an industry in whole, as code enforcement, and even in home inspection, we need to have a bigger push for safety.
Yeah. And one of the safety trainings that we had, and somebody's, they're going to be on our show pretty soon. It's in animal safety, because I've never dealt with animals. I know Rachel deals with animals, and and part of her duties. My trainee, my trainer when I started code enforcement used to be a dog, animal control officer. And it's funny because I remember this one time when we went to a home and she yelled at the dogs, "You stay out there, you get out of here." The dog literally was running towards us, stopped in their tracks. So then she yelled at him, he took off. And I was like, wow, I didn't, I didn't realize that dogs or, they stop and listen. I'm like, oh, to me, it was like the most amazing thing. So,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure Rachel can tell a million animal stories.
Animals are an interesting breed, aren't they?
Yeah, you just never know. I was bitten by a golden retriever the first time, of all things.
What did you do to upset that golden retriever?
Right, exactly. I walked into the backyard. It was a hoarding situation. Clearly, the dog was not happy. And so he came at me, and I thought he was just going to be playful because he's a golden retriever. And no, he decided he wanted to have lunch. And that was the end of the inspection.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. So when we talk safety, I know that not everybody wants to hear these words all the time, but, how did COVID really affect on the home business side? When we talked PPE, did that change your, thought process in going into an inspection, or did it in fact make it even better? Because, we touched a little bit about those folks who do get offended when we put on protective gear. Did COVID kind of help that, hurt that? How did that work for your business?
Overall, I think it helped.
Right.
Because it became the norm that everybody was wearing PPE.
Right.
And it became the norm for us as home inspectors as well. Because while you were, trying to protect yourself from getting COVID, you're also protecting yourself from a whole bunch of other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so overall, I think it was a positive thing. Like I said, everybody kind of expects now that you're going to have something on your face when you walk in the door in somebody's house, and nobody really gets offended. And but yeah, it did.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Escamilla, I do have a question, and I know it kind of relates back to what we first talked about, but, in all of your experience as a industry professional here, multifaceted, have you ever been a part of a municipality that doesn't have a home inspection type of program, in the sense of just very basic blight nuisance code enforcement, and how that really affected the community, or did you see an effect on the community?
I haven't been, luckily for me, I've spent all of my code enforcement years with the city of Pasadena. So I've been in one municipality. I've been with them I'm going on 14 years right now. And, I've been lucky enough to do that. But I am, and we do have, a very big active code enforcement department, and we do the property maintenance and complaints, and we also have the housing, apartment buildings and that kind of stuff. And so as far as that city goes, I think we're doing okay. But I have, as a home inspector, like I said, I've been to everywhere from Long Beach all the way up to Stockton, California, doing inspections. And so I see a lot of things, and I hear, because I keep in contact with the realtors and what cities are doing what and which programs each city has for inspections and what are requirements. Like Pasadena has a point of sale inspection that's required when you sell a house. And so there's a few cities that do, and we visited with some of these cities. I think Azusa was one of them. There's one near Long Beach. And so they have all these inspections. And so unfortunately, not all cities are like that.
Right.
Part of it because they don't have the programs in place. Part of it because they just don't have the resources in place. And it's sad to walk in these cities, because the moment you get in, as I'm driving, the moment I get into certain sections, for example, of South LA, you see the dramatic change in the quality of the buildings and the maintenance. And when I get called out to do an inspection there, I'm like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to worry. I don't have to necessarily just worry about the building. I don't have to worry about my car. I literally have to worry about my safety, because I had one where I happened to have to park because there was nowhere else to park to do this apartment building inspection right in the middle of a tent city. And there were literally drug deals going down in front of me. And I get it. Some cities are more limited in resources than others, and they can't pay attention to everything. But I wish they could.
Tony, in California, starting July 1st, 2022, anytime any code division receives any type of interior complaint, code enforcement has to respond. And that's, you guys have been doing that for forever. I mean, it's part of your housing inspections.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of
Yep.
jurisdictions that just do the outside ugly kind of deals, and it's a rude awakening to a lot of them that now they have to go and if they get a mold complaint, normally they would call the health department. Health department will go out there. Now it's code divisions that are going to have to do this, and so there's a lot of training that needs to take place. I know with the International Code Council, we have a training in about a week. We're doing the introduction to interior inspections, because some jurisdictions just never done it. Same thing with the point of sale. A lot of times people buy these homes. I've experienced this myself. Hey, we bought the house that way, and then code enforcement came down, and then something happened, and then we have to eat the cost for that. And doing these point of sale inspections, sometimes you as a code official, you see these illegal additions, and they're like, hey, that needs permits, it needs to come down, it needs to get legalized. And it's a good thing, but like you said, a lot of these jurisdictions just don't have the resources.
They don't.
Yeah.
And going inside, one of the things that I have seen over the years is that one of the things that you have to take in consideration going inside somebody's home is that person's demeanor.
Sure.
Because you never know what you're going to get. We have been places where the people are offering us cookies and donuts and stuff like that, and we have been in places where we're literally being cussed out when you walk in the door, and or thrown out. And it is a rude awakening if you're not used to going into people's homes. One of the things to take into consideration is the person that you're going to be in the room with, and your safety with the person that you're going to be in the room with as well. We had a home inspector, sadly, a few months back, it was about mid-year last year, who was shot and killed doing a home inspection. Both the realtor and the home inspector were shot. It was a family dispute. And I've ran into some of these as a code enforcement officer as well, where the realtor will call us out there to do a point of sale. and there's a family dispute, and the person meets us at the front of the property and said, "You're not coming in here." And we've even had to have the police show up, and you just never know what you're walking into. And one of the things to keep in mind is definitely who you're going to be dealing with as well. And sometimes it makes sense to go and bring somebody with you, if nothing else, just to just walk with you and keep an eye on things that you might not be keeping an eye on.
Yeah, situational awareness is always key, when doing
Yeah.
any of these type of inspections, because, a lot of times, even with home inspections, you really never know what you're dealing with. It's code enforcement officers, it's hard. People don't realize that how hard it is to be a code enforcement officer, because we're not there to tell people they have the prize winning home landscape award, we go out there and tell them, hey, there's something wrong with your property, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
And it's not always the cleanest the message to deliver. I mean, there's a way to do it. Rachel's an expert at it. She teaches a course on how to do effective communication and customer service. There's an
Nice.
art to what we do. And
Yeah.
going out there and being authoritative, it's not always the best thing. You're
Yeah.
there to say, hey, I'm here to educate you. Like you said, education's always key. You go out there, you do what you got to do, and say, hey, I'm here to help you. How do we solve this together? How do we resolve this? So
you can use my approach, as we call it, the Mary Poppins way to approach code enforcement, or as Pete says, the Ned Flanders way.
yeah.
It works, it works.
Yes, it
Yeah.
does. Yeah, I do call it the Ned Flanders. So if we ever meet Rachel, she's the most delightful person ever. I'm like, wow, you're just like Ned Flanders.
Compliment. Take it to heart.
Yeah.
No, but end of the day, you have to be the person that says, hey, I'm here to help you. How do we achieve this together?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
But just hearing the and then how did you get into code enforcement anyways? So we always ask that question at the beginning of the show. So how did you end up in the world of code enforcement?
So I back in early 2008, right before the market crashed, I was doing home inspections, and I was doing okay doing home inspections, but I could see the upcoming crash ahead of time, because I was out there, and I'd be doing an inspection, and I see the couple that's buying it, and not to say anything bad about it, anybody at all, and that's not what I mean, is that I know that the man has a landscaping business, and the lady cleans houses, and as I'm walking doing the inspection, I'm hearing the realtor tell them, oh yeah, you can convert the garage, you can rent it for X amount of dollars, yeah, your loan is only X percentage. But what they failed to tell them back in 2008 and leading up to that crash is that, yeah, your interest, it was an interest only, and it was going to readjust in about a year or two. And they said, yeah, you can refinance. And guess what? When the time came, they couldn't refinance, and their mortgage payments doubled. And it was really sad. It was really sad. And I saw this coming, and I remember being home one evening, and I had my laptop, I was watching TV, and I always try to keep up with what's going on. And I saw the posting for an inspector trainee in the city of Pasadena. And I was like, all right. Let me see where this goes. And sure enough, I got called in to do the test. And I remember I got there and did the test, and it was just like basic math and writing skills. Now, I was expecting, something more technical, because I took a test for the city of LA several years ago, and that was like taking an ICC test. It was like, yeah, it's pretty crazy. And so anyways, I got the interview, and then I got the second interview, and they offered me the job. And right around then, it's like, you can see, the clouds are moving in. So I took it as a trainee, even though I knew I was making less money, even though I knew I was, I had more qualifications than my boss at the time. And, but I remember one of my instructors at PCC, he was a retired LA County building official. And he said, you know what, just get your foot in the door. Just get in there. It doesn't matter what you're doing. Just get your foot in the door. And so I transitioned from inspector trainee into a regular inspector, and that's where I've been ever since. And I love both jobs. And so, like I said at the beginning of this, is if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And my wife uh, jokes with me about, when are you going to retire? And there was a famous author, and I can't remember his name right now. His answer was famously the day before the funeral. So. So yeah, that's how I got into code enforcement, and the difference in code enforcement is that I can actually affect change because I have the authority to make that change, whereas a home inspector I don't.
Yeah. You know what's funny is I sit on a lot of forums and watch. For me, code enforcement never seems like work. It seems like something that we do. We go out there, we talk to people, we get to meet people, and we facilitate that change. And to me, once you see that change, it's just awesome. It's in a sense of accomplishment in a way. And sometimes you can walk away, even though, yeah, you affect these people, but they say thank you for what you did for them. And to me,
Yeah,
that's a reward in itself, and it doesn't feel like work. So when I see people like, oh, I hate my job, I hate this person, I'm like, we're in the wrong business if we're doing that. I mean, we're here
yeah,
to facilitate that, that positive change. And I think
yeah.
sometimes that gets missed in code enforcement. But
Yeah, I see what you do, and I see how you're posting all the things that you do in the industry, and I think it's awesome. You're like me, it's like if you love what you do, it's not hard. I was joking just the other day, for my fun is nerding out on my current book that I'm reading right now is on expansive soil. It is nerd 101.
Come to Colorado, we got tons of that.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah.
You are a nerd.
Yeah. But yeah, end of the day, I think it's funny because you're the only person I think can make funny memes on home inspections. And it's funny because I'll do nerd out on code enforcement memes. And it's to me it's just funny because the people that get it, they get it.
They get it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think to me that's like you said, I watch your stuff, you watch my stuff, and
Yeah.
we're just nerds like that. And it's funny because I'll text Rachel, and we're just nerding out on something completely separate. But it's good stuff. But
Yeah.
and we do appreciate you coming on today. It's been a great conversation. Kind of like that difference between code enforcement and home inspections and how it ties in, and just being able to like just create that nexus. It's just good. So thank you for coming on, and we really
Yeah,
appreciate your time.
absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, it was a great conversation, and thank you for all that you do for the industry because I know you are on top of things, and I always see you at all the different conferences and the teaching opportunities and the show that you have on right now. So you do quite a bit for the industry, and I think we need to clone you two and just reproduce. Boom, we need a few more like that.
Isn't that the truth? Well, Mr. Escamilla, thank you so much for spreading your wealth of knowledge with our industry leading professionals such as yourself. As Pete said, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. We want to also thank everyone in our audience. And thank you, Ms. Morris, for your wonderful, relevant conversation and comments. And you folks all have an absolutely wonderful Friday. Thanks again for being here with us today, sir.
Have a great weekend.
All right, thanks. And we'll keep being nerds together. So bye,
Absolutely.
everybody.
Bye.
All right, see ya.